That at least I have.
Gentlemen,
Hello.
gentlemen and zebras.
And
Yes,
zebras,
thank you.
yes, indeed.
Yeah, that thing you were
Indeed.
just talking about, Big Zebra, remind me of a star here in St. Paul. Dreadlocks for dingoes.
Dreadlocks for dingoes.
Yes.
Wow.
I'm afraid. That's what I am.
It sounds like a very, very niche business.
A great band name, though. I once heard a great band name called the Baby Splitters, which very aggressive, but also very funny.
The baby splitters.
Yes,
Interesting.
and they didn't do any disturbing graphics with knives or anything. It was just that was the name.
Well, the reason why they didn't call the band the Teenage Splitters, because then it would be kind of like, well, I can kind of see it. A baby,
Yes, yes.
that's a little bit too harsh. That's a little bit too harsh.
Or maybe they were implying that the babies had knives and
Maybe.
were going to slit other people.
Maybe, yeah, I can see that too.
Isn't that a biblical allusion to the cutting baby in half?
Oh,
right.
That's right.
It is too, King Solomon.
Yeah. They claim he did it so that the baby, of course, could go to the right mother. But maybe Solomon really just wanted to see the baby cut in half, and we know the real story.
He was the first atheist, and he was hungry.
Ah.
Well, Solomon was kind of a bastard. I mean, when you look at exactly who Solomon was, spare the rod, what is it? Rod and children and stuff like that. What's up, Tobin?
Good morning.
Hey.
Yeah. So
it's
Solomon.
Tobin. Hi, Tobin.
Not a good guy.
Not to kill this excellent conversation, but
I
wanted
go
to
ahead.
ask before I forget. So, in Australia, we don't have unions for a company per se. So an industry will have a union. So in Australia, Amazon workers would just go to the retail workers union. Amazon don't get a say.
Oh, that's great.
That's interesting.
So when I hear about companies, meddling in unions and stuff, it's like, how do they have any say whatsoever? Like, unions should be almost mandatory.
Like it was a human right.
Like it was a human right.
Well, this is America, and this is where guns have rights and AR-15s have rights, but workers don't.
Oh, but people don't. That's
people don't have
right.
Right.
What if the people who couldn't unionize instead asked for a right to carry a gun at work? So when someone told them they only had 30 seconds for a bathroom break, they had to do that to someone with a Glock in their hip.
Well, I think that would create exciting new opportunities for the.
I see where you're going with this, but it rings of
Mad Max.
The only problem with that gun massacre is that the other people didn't have guns.
Yes. I'm not in favor of guns, but I just think that when you're being abused and, you live in a town where you don't have a lot of options, maybe you should use absolutely everything at your disposal, good or not. I'm not saying there's a lot to be said in favor of this argument, but when you are trapped, fight your way out.
I'm not one. I've said a lot of things and implied even crazier things. Like if John Brown were alive today, he'd be blowing up coal-fired power plants. And I'm not even going to talk about my past statements about Canada and the religious schools up there. But I think everything's on the table. Big Zebra.
I got something I want to know.
What's up?
I would like to know what y'all think about. I've heard this said about unions, is that if we have unions, then people get lazy and they stop doing their jobs, and then the companies do badly and because they can't fire the worker, and they're like stuck in their job in a union.
You can
What do
still
you
get
say?
fired.
So, how do you combat somebody like that?
You know what? I can't. If I say the words I'm going to say right now, I'd probably get thrown into court within like a very short period of time.
Mm.
I just happen to know someone who I was close with that was in a union and got fired. It took a while for them to get fired, but fired they did. Um, and so I've seen people get fired in unions. What it does is that it actually creates a process for that person to appeal to make sure that they're not being abused by their boss. That's what it does. Now the police unions, that's a there is definitely some issues there with about needing proper citizen oversight. But I would say, but by and large, um, when you
What the
think,
hell is that 420?
Sam,
Sorry, Jack's watching in the audience. Screw you, Andy.
oh, okay.
Hi, Jack.
Isn't that
Hi,
blue?
Jack.
But Tobin, I hope that answered some
It's
of your.
Bluey.
Does that answer some of it?
Yeah, it's a myth. If they're saying, oh, people can't get fired, no, if you're in a union, you can still get fired. If you're too lackadaisical about what the heck you're doing, you can get fired.
Yeah. And once again, if unions were the death knell of society, then how does Germany do so well? Right?
Mhm.
How does Western Europe do so well in terms of its economies? You have Britain, you have Italy, you
I
have
don't
France, you have the UK.
actually. I do know. I was going to say I don't see the great resistance because all they do here in Australia, for example, is because I've been in places where unions have been brought in by staff because they've felt unfairly treated or this or that. And all a union does is come in and work with the employee and the employer to make sure everything's above board, to make sure that you weren't treated unfairly. If you were, you'll be, given whatever dues you're owed or monies you should have been paid, whatever. It's not like they come in and shut places down or anything crazy like that. It's just that they force places to give people what is their due. So I can see why the resistance, because they don't want to give people what they're due.
Yeah.
Whenever I worked for Subway, as a kid, as a teenager, I would work over 40 hours, and this company, they would instead of paying me overtime, they would just like cut my hours the next week and put my overtime on the next week.
Yeah, they will do.
I would seriously work way more than 40 hours in a week.
Yeah.
I was too naive as a teenager.
Sure. Well, that's the thing. You have people who might be teenagers. They might be people who can't speak English that well, right? English isn't their native language. They cannot defend themselves against an owner, a capitalist who is looking to take advantage of them, because that is the nature of American-style capitalism, is to take advantage of workers. So you have this person who can't speak English that well, who can't really defend themselves. Then where is their recourse? Where is this worker's recourse? Well, how can they stand up for themselves?
And we have to remember what it was like before unions. There's an interesting book about an American incident called Big Trouble. And these workers basically formed a union at a mine somewhere. And the government was quite happy to show up and arrest all the miners and put them in a makeshift jail compound. And just perfectly content to do that because, they were blocking the mine owners' rights to conduct this business. And then in response, somebody created a bomb to blow up the governor
Yeah.
who had authorized this. And it was all really horrible. But, the right to not work and to insist that your employer negotiate with you in good faith is perfectly reasonable. And when you don't have that outlet, you might just trigger something. You might just trigger violence. And not allowing unions is a way to create violence rather than stop it.
And the thing is, right, this is from, I believe, Herodotus, the Greek historian, wrote this. It was about the siege of Melos, and I've just Googled it. It is the strong do what they will, the weak suffer what they must.
Yeah.
If there is just one rule of capitalism, I would say that is strong will do what they will, the weak will suffer what they must. And the thing is, by not being in a union, you have agreed, you have sold yourself down the river by becoming weak. That is what you are. You have chosen to become weak. And if that isn't the nature of toxic institutions, whether it's the fucking church or capitalism, it is turning yourself against yourself. It is giving you the poison and you saying, yes, sir, can I have more?
Mm.
And once you get an ear for it, once you start hearing it, it's like, it just fucking pops me off. That's what it does.
Yeah, and they try and sell it as a right to work state. And I'm not sure, can some of the Americans in the audience explain that to me? Because, in other
it's
words, you have a
double.
right to work without contributing to a union as a way to bust a union.
The thing is, it's doublespeak, right? So the nature of doublespeak, and let's just go over back to 1984, George Orwell 101 shit. It is to limit the degrees of freedom that you can think, right? I'm sure that we've all seen people, and as most of us here have been theists in the past, Christians in the past of one flavor or another. Once you start hearing new information or new ways of looking at things, that increases the degrees of freedom that you can think about, right? Oh, the flood was really a genocide tale. The idea about God killing himself for himself is absurd, right?
Mm.
This increases the degrees of freedom that you can think about things. What right to work, this kind of doublespeak, it is there to limit what is available for you to think about. And that is basically kind of mind control. That is mind control through language. And that's exactly what the right charges what the left is doing.
One of the greatest tools that unions have is basically exclusivity contracts, where they have a contract with an employer saying that everyone who works in a particular job position at that employer must be a member of a union. Right to work makes such contracts null and void. So a union cannot require everyone to be a member of a union. That's the main thing that it does.
Thank you, Dr. Tom Fillery. I needed to take a few moments there just to cool down, I think. As John Hudson said, let them eat hemlock. I like that, John Hudson. I like the reference.
But yeah, that aspect of union is just plain, simple, standard contract law that unions have adopted in order to protect workers. And they basically write laws to say that particular type of contract just becomes null and void, regardless of if you've had a pre-existing contract or not. It's just no longer enforceable.
Maybe it's also unions are an excellent safety valve when conditions are unsafe. If I, as just an employee somewhere, call some sort of government authority, the great way to deal with it as an employer is to say disgruntled employee or disgruntled ex-employee, and it just gets waved off somewhere. And now, if you have a union and the union makes an official complaint, it has to be dealt with instead of being ignored, which is a wonderful a plus for unionization.
Yeah, there really is no safeguards around here. Like, I mean, you can be fortunate and have, work for somebody who will take care of you if they, uh, you happen to get injured on the job. But there's places here that, like, I've worked for, and you're kind of like, if you get hurt, whatever, and if you're getting mistreated, you know, it there's no recourse for any of this. You
If you
know.
get hurt at work and you can't work, you can always make a fucking GoFundMe campaign, right? I mean, this is what happens. That was a
Right.
fucking joke, and it is kind of a joke, but it really is.
There's also the argument of, if you don't like your job, just get a better job.
Yeah, that doesn't work in real life. That creates some kind of fantasy world of totally liquid, job markets, right?
Yeah.
And that isn't how everyday people live their lives. I'll just find another job. It doesn't work like that. And anyone's taken an economic course understands that companies, if given to their own devices, will form semi-monopolies. There will be so you might still have individual companies, right? But they will settle on a set of rules. So in an unregulated system. I remember this from our microeconomics class back in the day. And so there will be this kind of accepted rules amongst the industry. And those accepted rules probably screw fucking workers without unions.
I put a link into chat, but I don't. It's a nice contrast to my previous gun comment about the pointlessness of having guns, and but I don't know if it's really appropriate to the stream. So maybe
I saw that story before. She actually so this story was about a librarian who got shot, but she got shot because she ran into someone, and then that person followed her back to her house. And the woman had a gun, brought it out, leveled it at the gentleman who she had hit and run with her car. I think the guy was in a motorcycle too. The guy, and this is how crazy the states are, right? So the guy had a concealed weapon permit. He had a legal, he was legally, it was okay for him to carry a concealed weapon. He pulled out his gun and just shot her dead. And welcome to the United States of America.
Yeah, it has a sort of Wild West feel to it.
Yeah.
And I don't, and all of them were in their rights under this environment to have these guns.
They were all legal.
And killing people is also within your right.
Well, it was legal for her to have the gun in her house. I don't think it was legal for her to go popping outside to
Well, she was threatened. If you've ever been followed, being followed is really threatened. I've been followed more than once.
She hit a dude with a car, and then she didn't even hide. She didn't call the cops. The other dude had called the cops, right? So he followed her on his motorcycle. Another motorist who had seen the whole thing followed him too. And this woman was, what's the clinical term? Out of her fucking mind, basically. Yeah.
But it's the Kyle Rittenhouse situation. I have this right to carry a gun around, even though I'm a fucking idiot, and present myself in situations where something could go wrong, and then whoops-a-daisy.
Well, that's why
goes wrong, and you start firing.
That's why, as a juror, you have the power to do jury nullification. You have the power to nullify laws, and you don't have to pay attention to the laws. You don't have to pay attention to what the judge tells you. If you want to vote your conscience, you can. You're not bound by any oaths. You're not bound by what the judge tells you. You're not bound by the laws. If you do not like the law, you can vote on a jury your conscience.
I agree. I think I want to go back on what I said earlier about getting a gun if you work in an Amazon warehouse. I think I'm just plain wrong.
Yeah, I took that as a joke. That's what I took that as.
Maybe workers should carry water pistols with them, and then squirt at their bosses when the bosses do something.
Spray bottle, and like a cat, you just spray them. Bad boss. Bad.
I think that's great. I once gave my boss a ticket. I found these joke tickets. It looked like an officer's ticket pad, and I gave him a ticket for excessive sarcasm
Hmm.
and
That's
wrote
good.
it out and presented it to him.
I just want to read what Jesse Bear wrote. I can't work full time because the childcare is so expensive. Yep. And we can't afford putting all three in care. So I have to work during the school days. Yeah. What I did when my kids were young, and I was a very special case. I worked all night. I did these asleep overnights, which gave me shit sleep. Um,
Mm.
and then these conservatives are saying that, oh, why aren't women having children? Right? And it's because you created a shitty system to disincentivize women from having children, right? And I swear to my fictitious God, it's going to be some point. I don't know if I'm going to be able to see it in my lifetime or my kids will see it in their lifetime that the government will pay people to have children. They'll treat it like a fucking job because raising
Mm.
children is a job.
It is.
Right?
Holy shit.
And if you want to keep the population stable in terms of how many people are around, then there's going to be and forgive me for saying this, I come to Jesus moment
Mm.
where we're just going to give couples money and treat it like it was a job.
There's a funny thing happening in Canada right now where the federal government is working with provinces to create affordable daycare. So it essentially, like in Alberta now, it's $10 a day per child daycare,
Oh,
and Quebec has its own system as well, but most of the provinces don't. I know that states in the U.S. are often prone to experimenting on social policy, and but I think if Canada does something, of course, it doesn't necessarily bode well for the U.S. But when your next door neighbor does something that's working well, maybe it'll happen in the U.S. I hope.
well,
Unfortunately, that sounds like socialism.
Oh, it sure does. And those socialist kids, those socialist babies, they're no damn good.
especially the ones that go to daycare in Quebec, they have the baguettes and
Yeah,
the berets, and
yes, they do.
all that.
And they smoke. They smoke like stags.
Of course they do. Jesse Bear. I'm in my early 30s. Very few of my same age friends have children, or only have one because of the cost. Yeah, many want to but can't afford it. Yeah, I can see that, Jesse Bear. Yeah, it is a financial burden. Children are, it's one of those things that you do because you want children. It's obviously an instinctual drive,
Mm.
but you get punished. You just get punished for having kids here.
I often tell my friends when they have a baby or an infant, and the infant becomes a toddler, I ask them when the baby's going to start pulling his weight around there.
Yeah.
So maybe we should start a sort of fake right wing thing, where these daycare babies should be put to work. Can't they, do some simple construction?
They can serve us
See-
some apple
see-
juice and maybe some coffee in the morning and stuff like that.
Yeah, yeah. Or maybe they could go clean houses. Oh, Jesse Bear, $200
Not
a week.
not
Oh God.
only does our government subsidise childcare,
Hmm.
and it's means tested, which isn't always great, doesn't always work the way it should do, but
Hmm.
multiple children also then get more discount. So you get like 3 for the price of 1.5 or something. So I
Oh,
guess
okay.
that's half price, but the
That's a great idea.
paying per child. If you have 5 children,
Yeah.
how is that parent supposed to work? But that parent needs work more than most other parents.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Well, way to go, Australia. What's it cost to have a kid in daycare in Australia? Do you know?
If you paid full price, it's probably like anywhere else. You probably pay $100 plus a day, but subsidized,
Hmm.
you can pay anywhere down to maybe between $10 and $20 a day.
Okay.
Yeah,
but
reasonable.
never ever pay full price. Like
Well,
the
yeah,
nobody really pays full price.
okay.
John
I'm
Hudson
sure
writes, my
there's some
daughter.
pretty exclusive daycares out there, but
Yeah.
Mm.
John Hudson writes, my daughter commented the other day they wouldn't have had a new baby without me here to help raise the children. Yeah, yeah, extended families. I mean, that's what my ex-wife and I did. We moved specifically near to family, her family,
Mm.
for child rearing. Help assistance.
see, but our government has a bit more of an incentive. Our population is so small. It's also why our immigration rate's pretty high.
Mm.
Our government just wants numbers,
Yeah,
and we're not having babies, so
most industrialized countries, um, and now I think all of them have actually, especially, well, now we're in a special case with COVID and everything, but even before COVID, industrialized countries, their populations were decreasing. The only reason why the U.S. wasn't was because of immigration. But it takes, I said it before, I'll say it again. It takes an average of 2.1 children for every woman to
Mm.
keep the population stable. And you have countries like Russia or Germany, it's like 1.7, 1.5. Those populations are decreasing.
And Japan and China are in a terrible spot too, aren't they?
Yeah, yeah. With Japan, they have a lot of old elder people, and those people need care. They need people to be with them to help them with their everyday living, right? Whether it's bathing, feeding, whatever. And if you don't have the population, then you have to ask people to come in to the country to help you help them.
You know
And
what might be an interesting program? I I would be interested to see like if they could make it to where the people who are having children, they could basically adopt an elder grandparent if they don't have an elder grandparent, or like make some kind of like a program to where it connects people to where they can it basically kind of takes care of the child care
yeah,
thing as well. And
that
also the elder person doesn't get left in some, I don't know.
help. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I know that for people with disabilities here, adults, there's like a foster system. I know this isn't exactly what you're talking about, but I knew a few people with disabilities who basically were fostered by people in their homes, and that system seems to work pretty well.
Mm. I just want to say hi to Cryptomeria, my stalker. Good to see you.
Not everyone wants kids. Cryptomeria, I have to agree. My girlfriend, not telling tales out of school, she'll tell you that's straightforward, is that she just never wanted to have kids. Her sister never wanted to have kids. And once again, meeting my birth mom and my half brothers and sister, there seems to be a genetic component to wanting to have kids. Right?
well,
So it's just like
and
a bell curve, right? It's a bell curve, and it's just like with any other trait, right? So some people are going to want to have a lot of kids. Some people are going to want to have only a few kids. Some
and
people don't want to have any
Andy,
kids.
I was
it's hard to inherit not wanting to have kids, though.
I'm sorry, what's that?
It is hard to inherit not wanting to have kids, though.
Yes.
I understand what you said.
well,
Yeah.
I was saying to Tobin and Grant the other day how I'm part of this yearly study, and they just gather statistics throughout the country. And if you so choose, you can get the report from the previous year when you do your one the next year. And when I got last year's, it was fascinating. They'd never reported on this particular stuff before. And it was all to do about belief and faiths and um, socioeconomics and all these correlations. Like, the wealthier you are, or the more well off you are, the less likely you are to have children,
Hmm.
the less likely you are to be religious.
Yeah.
So poorer means having more children and being more likely to be religious.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Well, there's the
and
reason. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
no, go.
Because in these societies that have poor social safety nets, the social safety net becomes your children, right? So it makes sense that if you're poor, you're going to have more children just so that they can look after you in your old age. And yeah, yeah, that makes sense.
And yes, as well as one that I found most fascinating was that um, the more wealthier you were, the more progressive you were, the more progressive your politics and your leanings.
Yeah.
Um, but the other correlation that tied into that was education.
Sure. Yeah.
So more money
And
means better
unions also make
education.
another job, don't they? I mean, that gives somebody else another job if you have unions, right? I mean,
Well, there's a couple of different things here. One with yes, more education. There is a correlation, not a one-to-one relationship, of course, but there is a positive correlation between having more education and being less religious, right? Um, and with unions is that you just created a less shitty society. You created a less shitty society, so it's more than likely more people are going to be put to work in a less shitty society, or that they'll be taken care of one way or the other, right? They'll have their needs met.
we need more money in uh flowing into people's pockets,
Yeah,
and we need unions. I strongly. What's King Farouk saying?
he's saying, I strongly support making it easier on people who want children, but the U.S. stubbornly makes it difficult. Yeah, because because the right will say it's socialism. Yeah, and you may say that, wow, it's kind of crazy for elites to work against the good of the country, right? But this is human nature. Elites, even a cursory look at history, you will see that elites typically do not care about the country that they live in, or they only care about it in the same way a slaveholder cares about their slaves, right? Whether you're talking about the Russian czars, whether you're talking about the French aristocracy or the king pre-revolution, whether you're talking about capitalists today, they care
Well, they care while it's in their best interest, don't they?
in their personal best interest. It's almost as if they're
Mm.
sociopaths, right? And they really don't care about the greater society. You can argue even, and I don't want to talk about China right now or the social political events going on in China, but there, Xi, the guy who's in charge of China right now, he is making specific choices to make China less competitive on the world stage. Why? Because he wants personal power over the state. And this is not an exception. This is the rule. This is what autocratic systems do: is that they make their countries less competitive over time because they want to have power over the long term.
I'm kind of amazed at what China has done, because I would have assumed that the rise of the corporate class would be considered an alternate power structure to the Chinese Communist Party. But the Chinese Communist Party seems to have accepted this and
Well,
just maintain control anyway by
well,
putting them in jail.
there gets to be a tipping point, right? Back in the 1500s, let me back up. The Chinese um, had a blue water fleet. They had the world's largest ironworks
Mm.
before like the 19th century, before 19th century England, and they decided to scrap it all. Why? Because, and this is my understanding from the rise and fall of the great powers, is that it threatened the power of the elites in China. Japan had a great, they made great muskets. Japan made great muskets, and yet they decided to outlaw muskets. Why? Because it threatened the power of the elites in Japan. This is the rule and not the exception, is that autocrats just want to autocrat, and that means making their country less competitive, making their country stupider. That's what it does. That's what they do. I mean, just look at fucking Donald J. Trump. He just wanted to make our country like even more stupid than it is.
It's very strange because my experience with Americans is that, and I used to travel to the U.S. a lot, 3 times a year. I tended to find them kind of worldly and well educated. That was in publishing. So I guess, but yeah. My experience was just kind of different. And then you have the rise of the teabag party, and then you have Donald Trump and QAnon, sure. And it's like the bottom fell out of the United States, and I don't know where the end is.
Yeah, well, I mean, so now it becomes a question whether or not the United States of America has a self-correcting system, whether or not the institutions are still intact to self-correct over time. And really, I mean, no one knows. No one knows until the next election, until the midterms, and then 2024 happens. But there are once again, if there's like one theme to this channel, it is there are worrying signs that there are institutional problems that were here from the very beginning of the Republic. We have too, our executive is too powerful. We have an imperial presidency, and those systems don't do well over time. It just makes me so angry. That's what it does.
And it's hard to decide, which form of corruption do you go after first? Do you go after, if I had to pick one, I would go after the gerrymandering. I would have some sort of national commission, and or a way of distributing electoral loads via connected postal codes, and that they have to be round or square or whatever. Anything to avoid things that look like crabs or squids, or things that have long, narrow strips connecting various majorities.
Yeah,
it's just so weird.
Yeah, it's a good question about where do you, in terms of tactics, like where do you put your efforts, right? Where with so much, you only have so much time and so much energy.
Yeah. And also
there's so many issues to go after.
Yes. Like, for example, if you took a relatively square state, like South Dakota or something, or Ohio, would you have a pie grid that distributed a city into slices of pie that went out into the sticks? Or would you have just relatively square grid matrix and have those squares have relatively the same population?
Well, I'll say things
you would have whatever's going to benefit you.
Well, benefiting democracy would be the goal, but you would always have an attempt at gerrymandering, I'm sure.
I will say, I'll start off with the things that I know, or that I think I know at least, right? Is that getting rid of the oversight of the government over redistricting in southern states that have historically been prejudicial in terms of their gerrymandering. The Supreme Court gutted that in the Voting Rights Act, I believe, a couple of years ago. That's wrong. That's nothing but trouble right there. I know that there are nonpartisan, and the other thing that I know is that leaving redistricting in the hands of politicians who are actively in power, that's not wise. That's not good. You can try to nonpartisan redistricting. That's what some states are trying to do, in terms of getting people who aren't in power, having committees that are made up of people on the left and the right. I imagine that would be a better system than what we have right now.
I would love to see that. A sort of a national electoral. Oh, there we go. I found a lovely photograph of the most gerrymandered districts.
Oh, yeah, the number is legion. Most, I just want to bounce off what King Farouk is saying. The thing that worries me most is the state legislatures passing laws that would allow them to override the voters and send different electors in presidential elections. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Here we go. I found it if you want to post it, Dr. Kennard, but it's not necessary. I'm sure Americans are well aware of gerrymandering.
Oh, well, yes, I imagine they are.
The graphic is just below the text in the article.
All right. Yeah, I'll see if I can post this. Sometimes StreamYard does weird things when I try to post things.
Oh, okay. Well, not to worry. Some of them look like weird folded proteins that you see. They're sort of biological.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. So some districts might have a funky shape just because, in terms of a minority majority city, certain groups might be in these weird spots throughout the city because they've been, basically ghettoized due to redlining, historically speaking. And so you can definitely make sense of why some districts in major cities might rightfully have weird shapes to it. That's because of, like I said, historical redlining, keeping certain people in certain areas. Marx asks, when are the aliens coming? When are they coming?
Any day now. Just like Jesus.
Yeah.
Right around the corner.
I keep on hearing Republicans say illegal aliens are coming from the southern border.
Oh.
Yeah.
Point well taken. Point well taken. Yeah.
They're already here.
If there is one thing that has been the cause of the rise of the right, it's our species' inability to handle xenophobia, right? You can see it in terms of what's going on in Europe and how immigration has been weaponized by the Russians and the Belarusians. I don't know, we haven't really talked about this a whole lot, but basically Belarusia and Russia have tricked people from the Middle East to going to Belarusia, and then the Belarusians are forcing people over into Poland, or they're like herding people into Poland, trying to destabilize the West, and it's a shit show over there. But
whoa,
yeah, and a lot of these right-wing governments, like in Hungary, for example, they've gotten into power because of xenophobia, because of the fear of the foreign people.
And we've had recent genocides. What was it? The Tutsis and the Hutus?
No, that was in
Rwanda.
Yeah, Rwanda. I'm sorry. Yeah, the Rwandan genocide. Yeah.
I may have those names wrong, but it was an effing nightmare.
Well, part of colonialism was keeping small groups, putting a small group within a country to rule over the majority of the country, right? And that was part of the colonialism 101 playbook, and that has a tendency of creating problems. Did we lose Sammy?
Yeah. Oh no.
Hey, Sam.
I just popped into the back.
It's like
into
magic.
the back room.
It was like magic.
There was a really weird, crazy cop story in the news this morning about a police officer who was off duty, hit a pedestrian, and put the body in the back seat of his car, and then returned to the scene. And he returns to the scene of the accident with a dead body in his car. It was really weird, and it made me wonder, are some police officers, just because of the stress of the job, do they just break one day?
Well, it does not. Being a cop does not incentivize the best behavior. I think that's pretty safe to say. It doesn't incentivize good mental health. It doesn't incentivize good behavior, and it brings in people who might be a little shaky intellectually, psychologically speaking, too, to begin with.
But are you saying he went to go and try and hide the crime, but then had a change of conscience or something?
I don't know if there was a change of conscience. I'm just checking. I posted the article in both chats.
Yeah.
Oh, he kept going to. He repeatedly went to the scene of the accident and did not call 911. So if he was remorseful, he would have called 911.
Yeah.
I mean, so why would he go back to the scene if he was hiding it? That's what makes me think that the stress of the job made him Fruit Loops.
The one thing that
well, and there's definitely a difference between guilt and remorse.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I suppose. I don't think there's enough information to
say either way.
Yeah, it just apparently another cop helped him. I don't understand. The story doesn't have enough detail. But he returned to the scene and then sort of sought help from the officer who was there. It's very weird. How do you have a crime scene when the body is removed? But maybe somebody reported it in and said, "Hey, somebody hit a pedestrian."
If there's one thing I've learned through the pandemic is that I call it the rule of 19, and there's no, stupidity is a renewable resource like the wind or the sun, and that it just keeps going.
Well, at any rate, it was in New Jersey. I don't know if this is a standard New Jersey operating procedure.
Good question.
Maybe it explains a lot of hit and runs where the body is never found.
Maybe. Hey, I just want to send out my best to Thomas Westbrook too. He does the Holy Kool-Aid channel. He got hit. He got hit. He was on his motorcycle. He got hit by a car.
Jesus.
And
he also organized the Faithless Forum.
He was one of the organizers. That's right. He was one of the organizers of the Faithless Forum. I just caught it on Facebook earlier today that got hit. I think the dude was going 40 miles per hour. And he just got clocked, basically. And like I said, I'm sending out my best. I got rear-ended on my motorcycle at a light by a car going 45 miles per hour. Bike got totaled. Shoulder is messed up. It's a public post, so sending out my best. Yeah. And he's saying, "Oh, I'm sorry if I don't put out many videos soon because I'm kind of all fucked up, basically." Yeah, Tom. So you can get well. You don't have to worry about making videos if you're all jammed up. 45 miles per hour. That's a pretty severe. That's a fast-moving car. You're lucky to watch it.
My cousin and his family were in a car like a week or two ago and got in a head-on collision. He and his wife both have broken spines now. Their kids were in the back seat and are fine, but they went to the hospital, had to have surgery, but instead of recovering in the hospital, they were sent home because there were too many COVID patients. And serious injuries, major surgery, and they had to be sent home immediately because of COVID.
Yeah. The rage, I've been able to say rageful words so many times over the last hour and a half, and now I think I might just be running a little out.
Yeah. And I want to take the opportunity to point out the importance of when you can, and I don't want to put guilt on anybody who doesn't have means to, but people who do have means to support your creators, because like Thomas now, Vice Rhino, who just lost his wife,
Mm.
has to now raise 3 kids himself. His channel is his sole income.
Yeah.
And as we know, YouTube is the scum of the earth. So if it wasn't for Patreon and other means, these guys wouldn't survive because they can't create content at the moment. And if it wasn't for the patrons staying patronized, whatever that term is, yeah, they'd be screwed. So,
One thing that, and I want to bounce off that too. I believe his name is Paul Duncan. He runs the Revolutions podcast. I've talked about the Revolutions podcast a number of times. He also had the History of Rome podcast. During the height of the pandemic, he just told people, look, it's tough. I'm doing okay. Go out and support people who aren't doing okay. Go support, other creators who may not be doing okay right now. And I think that says a lot about the guy, about his character.
Who is that?
That was Paul Duncan. He does the Revolutions podcast. He also does He also did the History of Rome podcast. Really smart guy. He puts out great material. And like I said, during the midst of the pandemic, he's like, I am doing okay. You should go out there and support people who are not doing as okay as I am. And props to him.
That is an admirable thing. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Heck yeah.
Yes.
Mike Duncan. I'm sorry. That was his name. Mike Duncan. The Revolutions podcast.
Heck yeah.
So I think I'm going to close things down a little bit early. I have to fill out a form. I have to fill out like a 2-page form to do form stuff. And then I have to get ready for work and everything too. But,
Okie dokie. Thank you so much for the stream, sir.
Always fun. Always fun.
I'll go be responsible.
Mm.
Okay. I'll see you all tomorrow, normal time, doing the same crazy stuff. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Shamala hamala.
Shamalama.
Okay. Now I'm still hitting the button. Maybe the button's working. I mean, I don't know.
Still red.
It's still
We're
red.
still live.